Hi, guys, it's Carlo here. Thank you for listening to our latest episode. It's the support of our community like you that allows us to continue to grow and make this into something truly extraordinary. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to listen to it without the interruption of ads and maybe even experience some bonus content, I'd invite you to join us on our newly launched Patreon. And if maybe that's not something you can do right now, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting on places like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that good stuff. You'll find us under @Millennials and Community for pretty much all of those. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
1, 2, 3, 4.
On this week's episode of InfoM.A.C, we respond to the idea of having to work longer before we can retire. Join us as we explore the idea of extending the retirement age to 70 years old, what it means for millennials, and what you can do today to have a better shot at those golden years. Thank you for being part of our community. Hey there, guys. I am Carlo. That is Matt. And this is an InfoM.A.C episode. This is brought to you by the Millennials and Community podcast. So what is InfoM.A.C? InfoM.A.C is a quick episode that we're putting together about a current event, something newsworthy that affects millennials and the communities around us in an effort to bring you the info you need from the unique perspective of millennials that are just trying to do our best in this world. So today's topic, right, to get into it, is this idea of raising the retirement age. Now, what I'm talking about specifically is there is a representative down in the United States by the name of Nikki Haley that has been talking about raising the retirement age from 65 to 70. And this has sparked some controversy, some questions, and some misunderstandings for sure. But what she's basically saying is that because life expectancy is longer, we need to work longer. And that is arguably upsetting a lot of people. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And I'm going to try and bring my expert opinion into this. And hopefully Matt can bring some great questions and give you guys some good information. So Matt, what are your thoughts on this before I get into my crazy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're kind of conditioned, at least when we were kids, we were kind of conditioned that our working career was going to be 40 years, and then we could sail off into the sunset with European cruises and things like that. So definitely the idea that somebody at a government level is going to mandate the idea that we have to work 5 more years before accessing some pretty significant retirement programs is scary, I guess. And it feels threatening that a government would unilaterally decide that.
Sure. And I guess one point of clarification to make is that nobody can force you to work until 70 or 67 or even 65. You can retire whenever your financial situation fits that. But this idea of the government programs that many people rely on to supplement their income in retirement is now no longer going to be made available to you until this, age of 70 rather than 65 when it was done is definitely a scary thing, because for most people, they rely on that kind of stuff to even make retirement possible at all. So, she's the point she's trying to make is that we're living longer, and this wouldn't be something that would be thrust on, baby boomers, even millennials. It's something that we would notice in our younger people entering the workforce. So our Gen Zers are the ones that are going to see it first and foremost, where they should expect to work to 70 rather than 65. Like that American dream, quote unquote, is now changing, right? And I guess it's also worthwhile pointing out that this is something that is being talked about. It's not being implemented. It's not, in for review with any sort of government body. It's also primarily in the United States. So if that's the question, or if that's the statement, why is it that we're talking about it today being Canadians? Well, obviously we have some American listenership, but at the same time, this was talked about back in 2018, 2019 here in Canada. The Conservative government actually wanted to increase our retirement age from 65 to 67, and they had laid out a 10-year plan to slowly creep towards that age of 67. Now, when the Liberals took power in 2019, they limited that plan. So our actual retirement age is still 65. But still something worthwhile talking about, because there's kind of a changing landscape in the work environment, the corporate environment that we have in North America.
So yeah, I guess something that I'm curious about, how much of this is based on life expectancy, and how much of this do you think is governments trying to hedge whatever sorts of federal pension programs, like in Canada, the CPP, of course, hedging it against an overall aging population?
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's a really great question, because at the end of the day, I think the government is a little afraid of the fact that a lot of the company-sponsored programs are starting to go away. Things like pension programs, RRSP matching, any sort of retirement accounts are starting to become less and less common in our corporate environments here in Canada. So I think that of course is happening down in the States too. I think there is a very large pressure on the government to say, well, we can't be responsible for all of this. We don't have that capacity. And they are basically saying we can't. We have no other option here other than to say, well, we're going to need more time, because the more time the government can stand collecting money from the working population, the more money there is to effectively help the retired population. Now, what's really interesting is that if you look at the Canada pension plan, it is actually the number one performing government-run pension plan in the world. We've been very fortunate to have that pension plan be managed by some great fund managers, and they make a very good rate of return. And even with that, the general consensus in the financial community is that for a majority of younger millennials, and especially the Gen Zers, that program may not exist come time for us to actually make use of it. So we have the best performing in the world. I don't know what the American pension plan looks like, but it does raise some questions. Where do they stand? And is this the government basically saying, we can't help you? We don't know what to do. Figure it out on your own.
So tell us a little bit, because this is definitely something that I'm not as familiar with. What would an additional 2 years or an additional 5 years, would that actually make a significant difference in terms of the overall security of a fund like that? So of course, if life expectancy is increasing, then obviously the length of time that these programs would pay out per person would be longer, and that's going to contribute to a lessening of the volume of that fund. But is that additional 2 years or 5 years of contributing into programs like that before withdrawing from them, is that going to make a significant difference into the overall health of these funds?
That's a really great question. And I think you got to look at it on a very large scale, particularly with the density of our populations, right? So if you take a look at the population that is currently entering into retirement age, it's the baby boomers, right? 90 million of them in North America, all retiring within 18 years of each other, all for the most part relying on these programs. So that means if they were to extend the retirement age by 2 years or 5 years for younger generations, that's an additional amount of time that you have less people taking advantage of that program. It's also additional time for the younger generations to be contributing to that program. So it's kind of like a delayed game that they're playing, where we hope we can keep this program flourishing long enough to keep the current retirees, financed before they pass away, just in time for the new ones to enter. The thing that's a struggle is that although the millennial population is not as large as the baby boomer population is, there are a lot more millennials than there were Generation XY prior, right? Or the generation prior to the baby boomers, because you can't have so many people build families in a time of arguable prosperity that the baby boomers had, and then them not have kids, right? Like the 2 to 3 child family is the norm in North America for a baby boomer family, right? So by extending all of this, it's just less people, more time to accumulate, and in hopes that would, equal a better time. It may not mean more money for people on an individual basis, but it might mean handling the larger amount of people.
So it sounds like, and so obviously this isn't happening yet, but it sounds like there's enough interest in kicking the tires around this, that this could be something that could become reality in the next, who knows, year, depending on obviously the U.S. candidate that gets elected in the presidency, and certainly within several years, potentially in Canada. So if this was to become a reality, what are some things that, like, how would this affect you and I if this were to happen today?
Yeah, that's another great question. So regardless of whether this was happening or not, the sad reality of it is that the idea of working for 40 years, for 40 hours a week, being able to afford a home, marriage, kids, white picket fence, it doesn't exist anymore. So it is really up to each individual person and family to try and provide for themselves come retirement time. And of course, right now that's more difficult than ever because of the cost of living and the direction that our financial society is going. So it's going to mean that unless you have a really solid plan moving forward, financially speaking, you might end up in a spot where you're forced to work to 70, even though that retirement age is still 65, right? Because you just cannot afford it. So, it's one of those things that if I can make any sort of professional recommendation, it's going to be speak with a financial professional, right? Have someone that can help you work your way through this. There are a lot of things in this world that have become very self-service, all right? That, booking travel, pretty much everything. Like I can go online, I can do this myself. And with the advent of a lot of AI fund managers and AI, platforms, there is that ability to continue down that path. But in my professional life, a conversation I very commonly have is this idea of, if you don't have the key understanding about how money works, when it comes time for you to make financial decisions that can impact you long term, you may not make the right decision. You're going off what you know. And if you don't know enough, how do you make that decision? So I would definitely encourage anybody that is concerned about this. And as a millennial, we're kind of all at that age that we should for sure start thinking about these kind of things. You should talk to a financial professional, whether that means going into your bank or another financial institution that you feel comfortable with. And I really want to stress that, because a lot of the conversations I have with people is that they don't trust anybody in the financial institutions because they don't feel like they actually care about them as a person. So shop around, find an advisor that you feel resonates with you, that understands you, your dreams and your goals, and form a bond with them, because good financial advisors care about the people that they service. So I would really encourage you to find someone good. And as a bit of a shameless plug for myself, if you live in Canada and you're looking for someone to have a chat with, reach out to me directly. I can probably answer your questions for you.
What would you recommend as 1 or 2 or 3 questions to ask a potential financial advisor to evaluate if they're the right person to be doing business with?
Sure. I would ask them what is available through your platform, right? And what I mean is, when you walk into a specific financial institution, is that advisor forced to sell only the products of that financial institution, or are they a brokerage that has the ability to shop the industry for you? Because it's just like buying a car. We go to a dealership, a BMW dealership, you can only buy a BMW there. But if you go to a wider dealership that has lots of different brands, your choice is bigger. You'll find the car that is right for you. It's the same in the financial and pretty much all kind of businesses. So there's that too. Of course, are they licensed? There are a lot of people, a lot of experts on social media that will tell you about your finances that hold no licensing. So they're just talking about out of their experience, and that's not to devaluate their experience in any way, but it is to basically say they are functioning without oversight. When you are licensed in the financial industry, everything you do, there's a system of checks and balances that you have to follow all the time. And if that is not something that this person is beholden to and they're giving you advice, I would be weary of that, right? Those would be my two big ones.
And what is, other than seeking someone to talk to, what's one thing that you would recommend that people do today in terms of their own financial wellness, just to kind of take steps towards bettering their future?
This is one of my favorite things to teach people. It's the pay yourself first rule. Okay. And this is something that it can be difficult, especially right now when there are people working several jobs just to survive. But the pay yourself first rule is that when you get your income, you immediately take 10% of that and put it away. And the logic behind this is because it's the first thing that you do, you will start looking at your available funds as that less 10%. And you'll learn to live within that. And then you take that 10% and, maybe it means starting by putting that in a piggy bank, under a mattress, in a savings account, something. That's a broader topic. But by doing that just at the beginning of everything, it means you're squaring away just that, might be an itty bitty amount, but at least you're doing something. And you ingrain that in you from the get-go. Like I teach people about this when they're 13. This is when you should be starting this, and just let it go to work for you. And because sometimes it's really hard to find $300-$500, to put away. If it's $50, it's $50, but you got to start with something. That the raising of the retirement age is a given. It's not going to happen. At the end of the day, for as long as time has happened and we've had organized government and organized social programs, it has been the responsibility of the younger to contribute to the retirement and to the well-being of the older. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that there is a lot more older than there is younger right now. You look at the growth of our populations, we're not having kids. So it means when we hit retirement, who's taking care of us? There's no one next in line to really be taking care of us. There's not enough. So it's a given. So you have to do something for yourself. You have to take that responsibility for yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Fantastic. And with that, we will wrap up here. This has been an InfoM.A.C speaking about the idea, the concept of retirement ages being increased by our respective governments. Once again, as always, if you have any questions, want to weigh in, have anything that you'd like to contribute on this topic, we would love for you to connect with us on our social media platforms, on our Discord channel. And if you have any other suggestions for current events, current topics that you'd like to see discussed in our InfoM.A.C series, you know where to find us. We would love to be able to lend some different perspectives to things that are happening now that are top of mind for you and your families.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. And we'll see you on the next one.